Hello, you all. We're here today with Charlotte Kemp. She's speaking to us directly from South Africa, Cape Town. Is that right, Charlotte?
That's
And
correct. And it's finally lovely weather here. So, yeah, it's a really good time.
okay, and we had a kind of warm winter this year here in Brazil. And today, as we feel the springtime coming, we are more of a winter day. So it's kind of cloudy and a little bit rainy, but it's fantastic to be together. We have 5 hours of difference, so it's really fantastic to be together. And Charlotte is a futurist, a speaker. She's works with executive leadership, coaching, and her core activity is linked to the future. Isn't that right?
That's correct. There's the future is such a broad space to be in, but how we think about the future, that is what makes my brain uh, really spark with new ideas.
Let me share how I got to know Charlotte. I was uh, uh, searching for new books on future thinking, and that's where I found Charlotte at Amazon. And then
Cool.
from reading her book, one of her books, I mean, she's such an amazing author with so many books put out. We were just talking about it before we start recording our conversation. And I've read two of her books. There's a third on the way to be read, and that's how we got together. And I invited her to come to the to join the Future of Work Global Network, which has more than 30 fellows today, and we've been exchanging contents on future thinking and the challenges for the workforce. And also, she has put me into contact with some other people. It's been some time already, about more
Yes.
than a year. We're walking together in this endeavor. Uh, I'm very happy.
Oh, thank you, Volney. And I love seeing the amount of content and ideas being shared in the Future of Work group. There is so much that could be done. And every time we share an idea like that, it inspires others to try and do something different and not just put up with things that we've got from the past. So yeah, it's really great work. Thank you.
Mhm. And I just read, I can't remember now who put out, but uh, the person was listing some of the challenges. We have, of course, the uh, global warming as in peace, and then we go into artificial intelligence, how AI will kind of,
Mm.
and it's impossible in this conversation of the challenges and how the future will come up to us, not to talk about the future of work and how we will
Mm.
do with all that with all the population, that
Mm.
who needs to have an activity and have their own means of taking bread home, right?
Yes, yes.
And one thing that it's fantastic is you do your work going into your neighboring countries. You were in a leadership position for
Mm.
the African continent. Can you share a little bit about it?
Thank you. I discovered years ago, to my horror, that because of the media that I had consumed, that I felt more comfortable traveling to the UK or traveling to the United States of America than I did to traveling to other countries in Africa, because I didn't understand. And I decided I had to challenge that. And the more I've discovered about the work and the culture and the incredible creativity and innovation of people in Africa, the more excited I am about the work that is happening here. And so I pursued a couple of leadership roles very intentionally so that I could change my perspective on the world. And the one that has just come to an end now is I've been president of the Global Speakers Federation. And the Federation is the body to which our local, national or regional professional speaking associations all belong. So I was local president here in Southern Africa of the Professional Speakers Association, and then became president of the Global Speakers Federation. And in that capacity, I was now talking to people who are either successful or aspiring professional speakers and running associations or wanting to start associations around the world. And the minute you get a leadership position like that, it is an incredible opportunity and honor, but an opportunity to really understand things better. So now I can see how we're struggling with certain things here in Africa, but we're struggling with the same things in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. So we're not unique in our problems. We're not the only part of the world that is having a challenge like this. It's happening in other places. And when we see that reflected in other places, then we get better insight into our own situation, and we get more hope and encouragement about finding solutions. That is all in the speaking world, but speakers are really creative people. They're very hopeful. They've got some expertise or some insight or some experience, and they stand on a stage in front of an audience and they share this with the audience to inspire them to act or think differently. So I find what speakers do is very closely aligned to what futurists do, is we're saying, this is what we've inherited from the past, and this is our context, and here's how we could be going in the future, but maybe we want something different. So how do we define what that looks like? How do we even know that that's possible? And then how do we do that? So for me, it's an incredible opportunity to see those two kind of career paths intersect. It's such a powerful place. But that has just given me so much more insight into what the futurists in Africa are doing. So I run a couple of different projects really trying to find out. And the one is, it's kind of just been a bit of a soft launch, but it's a journal that looks at what is the futures work being done in Africa by futurists in Africa, or futurists from Africa, or futurists who have studied in Africa. So we made it kind of broad, but what are the stories about Africa? And we've got the first journal published, and I want to be able to repeat this. And it's just drawing essays and project updates from futurists together around a theme, and then starting a conversation. So we can start to say, there is work being done in Africa, and it might use the same models as elsewhere, but the context is so different. And that's why it's important. So yeah, the first one was just absolutely thrilling to be able to talk to people who are doing things, even like very near futurists, people who haven't really studied futures thinking to any big degree, but they got some insight. They're doing practical work on the ground. That is really exciting to see. So that's the big project that I've just finished recently.
Nice. And as you were saying about the speakers, they bring a message of hope and motivation, and a optimistic take on as you view the world. Of course, we got so many challenges, but it's important. And one of the things I've learned as I studied the future, and as I want to also influence those who read me and those who listen to what I have to say, is that when you work with foresight and futures, it's not a theoretical exercise only. Of course, when you set up scenarios,
Mm.
you must take into account that, maybe even with 4 or 5 scenarios for the future, there will be a one that you haven't thought about.
Yeah.
But the thing is that if you start thinking on the future and you have the future's perspective, you start to build and to practice your own future life in
Yeah.
such a way that you are not just passively accepting what's coming into to you. And
Mm.
that proactivity with the future in mind is something that we need to do. And I
Yeah.
will take that to our both continents, Africa and Latin America,
Yeah.
because this is, I think, one of the big challenges. Of course, we have to think and we have to discuss the future of work,
Mm.
but we have to discuss the future of society, for
Yeah.
both continents, because this is a big challenge, and we have to build our own future. We don't have to wait for others.
Yeah. No, I like that. And I like how you say it is practical because I know that I can spend too much time in philosophy. I love thinking about the ideas. And that can be entertaining, but when you come to the future of work, people need something practical to work on. But for me, one of the biggest powers of any of this kind of work, like scenarios, like you were just saying, is that you talk about the scenarios, you kind of like design them or explain what they could look like, and there's 4 or 5 different versions, and it is a philosophical exercise. But it all comes back down to, in this moment in time, do we want to go towards that negative scenario, or would we rather move towards the positive one? And in this moment of time is the only moment we can take action to choose better. So the more we choose, every time we choose to move more closer to the better scenario, we're moving away from the disaster that we want to avoid. And that's the practical thing. And it helps our brains to kind of open up and see things and contemplate consequences. And, if you're trying to get fit, if you eat another bag of chips now in front of the TV, that's a choice. Or if you get up and go for a walk and then come back and have half a bag of chips, you're making a better choice. Those practical decisions, every day they kind of, mount up towards the future that you want, not the one you're trying to avoid. And we can do that in any conversation about the future of work or society or life or anything.
And do you personally, see, do you feel, do you have observed that people are more prone to have a future perspective, or they are still hanged on past
Mm.
and present, living on the present? How do
Yeah.
you?
um I do have a circle of friends who are very creative and optimistic. So I know that there are lots of people who are very intentional about creating their futures, but I also come across very often um, clients or people in an audience that I work with, just people that I come across in daily life, who they'll say something like, but there's no choice, there's no option, there's nothing we can do, we just have to carry on, we just have to work harder, we just have to hustle more. And it's sad and exhausting that people just feel like they have to work faster and faster and do more just to stay in the same place, and that there isn't any hope for them. And I am aware, in terms of our ethics, that there certainly are people in the world that are in terrible circumstances where they do not have this luxury of choice. But there are other people who do have the choice, who could take the choice to design a better future, but they don't know that they can. Their minds have never been, introduced to the idea of futures thinking, of having agency of the future, and they just keep going around in a circle faster and faster because they can't keep up with how the world is changing, how work is changing, how generating an income for yourself to survive just basic daily life, that is changing. And some people just, they can't see those changes happen, and they kind of fall off this treadmill, and there's no hope for them ever getting back on again. And that's what we want to avoid. We need to have enough futures literacy to be able to see and anticipate what is coming, and make sure that we're prepared to, at a minimum, keep up with what is happening. So yeah, there are different groups, and we encounter them at different times, and there's, again, different ways of dealing with them. You can't have the same conversation with somebody who's in a hopeless situation, who are there because of their circumstances, and they have literally no choice. But other people who do, how do you help them gently to see opportunities in the future without causing too much psychological distress, basically?
Yeah, as I said in the introduction, Charlotte is a prolific author, and I think that you could mention at least 2 or 3 things that is just for the beginners, of those who want to move, from living fully on the present and the past, to start living on the future. I know there are big challenges. Scenario planning works with macro issues, but what would be the simple initiative that normal people could start doing, as you said, taking in example the creative people that you mentioned? What would be, 2 or 3 simple simple initiatives?
Okay. What I love about the tools that we use and the models that we use in futures thinking is that they are really scalable. So we know that a lot of them, if you look into how they were designed by multinationals, by governments, by the largest militaries in the world, and they've been used for that. So we know that they are good models. So scenario planning and axes of uncertainty and 3 horizons and Delphi method, they're good. They're really powerful. But they're also scalable. We can actually bring them down and communicate about them in a very simple way. And that's what I love doing. I want to be more democratic. I don't like this only being in the hands of big organizations who can afford hundreds of thousands of dollars for a research project. Why can't an ordinary solo entrepreneur or business owner use these same tools? So when I do communicate about them in that way, my oldest daughter, who was a student at the time, she sat in on one of my workshops, and when we finished, she's so excited. She says, I can use this to plan my career and my studies to prepare myself for my career. And I'm going, the minute a 20-year-old can say, I can see how this tool can be used for myself, then we know that we've got a useful tool. So that's really powerful. But what I like to do is this. Every futurist has their kind of like their favorite things that they talk about. And anybody who listens to a futurist, you'll hear different things, and you'll say, well, should I be looking at scenario planning, or should I be looking at trends, or should I be looking at, and you don't know where to start. So this model encompasses all of those. And it's in 4 stages. The first stage is kind of like, think of a compass. So like up at north going towards east. The first stage is gather intelligence. What is a problem? What do you need to know? What are the trends that are out there? Who are the people who are experts in this problem? Who are the stakeholders in our problem? You want to gather all the intelligence so that you know what you're dealing with, because you can't solve a problem if you don't know what the problem is that you're solving. So gather all the intelligence, and there's tools for that. The second one is to manage change. Now, we're going to have to change because we want to now become more relevant or prepared for the future, or we want to we need to kind of get the team to learn some new skills, or we need to change software, or we need to go into the office, or we need to work from home, or we need to find a different business model or profit model. Something needs to change. And human beings are really strange about how they handle change. It's like, you can't tell me what to do. But if I come up with the idea, then I think it's great, and you should do what I'm telling you to do. So we need to understand the psychology of change, and we need to understand some of the implications of change. So we're going to be changing one way or another. We're either going to be becoming better and more relevant, or we're going to be falling off the treadmill and become irrelevant and then broke and then without a job. So there's going to be change. So that's the second part of change. The third part is describing the future. And as futurists, this is the fun part. This is the scenario planning, the visioning, the creating artifacts for what the future could look like. And there we describe what the future could be. It could be terrible. It could be fantastic. It could be in the middle. There could be this implication from all the drivers of change. So there's a political implication, or an economic one, or new legislation, or new technology. So all those different, what could the future look like? We're describing it. And then we're going to take some action to move towards our preferred future. So now we come up to the fourth part of this compass. And now we're going to test our strategy. Are we moving closer to the future we want, or are we moving closer to the future we're trying to avoid? What is going wrong? Why are we not getting in the right direction? So those 4 stages is gather intelligence, manage change, describe the future, test your strategy. If you do those 4 stages right now, you've done a futures plan. Anybody can do that right now without having to do all the complicated stuff. And then as we learn to think like that around those 4 stages over and over, then we can go deeper into learning the tools, or getting more resources, or getting coaching, or going on a workshop, or whatever, so that we can get closer and closer to designing better futures that encompass more people, that gets the world in the direction we want to go. I know that sounds very motivational at the end.
No, for sure. That's fantastic. Very, very simple. It's not, you don't have to take a 3-year course to start doing. You can do it today. You can do it tomorrow. And it's a way to put into action a future perspective on your own life or on your own organization, and then really work it out to make the future happen. As you said, describing the preferred future and make it happen. That's fantastic. You were sharing before we started a little bit about your next book. Can you tell about it? Will it? Are you reserving it to be a surprise, or?
No. I can share. What I often do as a keynote speaker is that I design a keynote about a particular topic, and I share it as a webinar on occasion. I share it with some clients, and I play around with it. And when I feel like people are resonating with it, then I sit down and really dive into it and turn it into a book, and sometimes into an online course or a workshop. And this one is, I love it, but I feel like I haven't quite finished it off. So I'm quite happy to put this out for conversation or input from other people. But it's called Exponential Thinking for Exponential Times. So my little shorthand is like ET to the power of 2. So exponential thinking for exponential times. And it comes from the quote, Peter Diamandis quote, where he says the world is no longer local and linear and local, it's global and exponential. And I want to add in that it's integrated and quantum. But because we're living in this exponential world where we can have a conversation like this between Cape Town and Brazil and talk about our weather, we couldn't do that before, not as easily. These things now are just, they're part of my daily schedule. So we can have conversations, we can source information, we've got artificial intelligence, we can dive deeper into topics, we can create things on the fly. It's an amazing world right now. But if we want that to be if we want to be relevant and valuable in the work that we're doing, we have to be able to manage this conversation and this exponential world where things are so much faster. And the answer is not to try and run faster. We cannot physically keep up. And there's a quote that I use in the book, a little story from Through the Looking Glass from Lewis Carroll's book, Alice in Wonderland. And in this one, it's called, I've forgotten what it's called, but I'll explain it and my little name will come. But in the story, the Red Queen, Queen of Hearts, is running, and she's got Alice by the hand, and she's running really, really fast. And Alice is trying to keep up, but a little short leg is she can't keep up, and she's getting exhausted, and she kind of tugs at the Queen, and they stop. And she says, "Why are we running so fast?" And the Queen says, "In this world, you see, we have to run twice as fast to stay in the same position." So there are lots of people that I know who are running twice as fast just to stay in the same position, but their position wasn't good in the first place. They cannot keep up. They're becoming irrelevant. They're just trying to do things, more things quicker. And then we get things like artificial intelligence. And I'm on a panel in 2 weeks' time. I'm running the panel. So I got access to these really great AI brains that are doing some amazing work. And one of them said that we've seen this before, not obviously with artificial intelligence, but with computers and technology in the past. And when all the computers and technology and apps and everything came out, people were saying, futurists were saying, people in the future will only have to work, a handful of hours a week, nothing like 40 hours, like just a handful of hours, because the computers will do all the work. And so now people are looking at artificial intelligence and saying, wow, AI can summarize this and produce that and give me, excerpts of that and draw this image for me and post all this content for me. Now I can work fewer hours in the future, but we don't. We as humans just find more and more work to do. So now we're filling our hours with more work because we know we can produce more with AI. So we just keep going faster and faster. And that's not healthy. It's not good. We're not creating good work. We're creating more work and more noise and more, stuff. But
we're not being productive.
We're not being, yeah. It's a deeper thing of productivity. It's like the value of the productivity is not good enough. So, so we need to have a look at that. So that's kind of the theme of the book, and a lot of the work that I do is how are we thinking about this? What are we actually valuing? What are we actually trying to achieve? And once we get that right, then we can take a deep breath and step away and not feel like we have to just keep producing the whole time. We want to produce something that is meaningful and impactful, but that means our thinking has to change. That's exponential thinking.
Nice. I was thinking about the Queen of Hearts. The Queen of Hearts around the beginning of our conversation, because you already had mentioned, we're working faster, harder, and that's not the way. You will not go out of your own place, even if you speed up twice what you were running. Because, you have to change your mindset. You have to change the context, and you have to change your activity. That's fantastic. It's we're the way we relate to the future, and we relate to how we are not doing the things as we should, and we're moving on a passive mode, and letting what's happening in the world influence us, when it should be the opposite. We have to influence. We have to decide what's best for us. What about your books coming out into Portuguese? We have a project like that.
I'd love to do that. I really would. I have had one book translated into Farsi. We haven't published it yet, but it was a bit of a passion project. I did some work for some women in Afghanistan, and one of them took my book about being a conscious futurist, and she's translated it. And we just have to finish off a few things. But I love, and we said this earlier, I love being able to have conversations with people in different parts of the world. And when you have those conversations and you learn something new, it creates deeper insight for yourself. So I've been known to sit with, we got a futurist colleague who did his PhD in Spanish. I think he's in Ecuador, and he sent it to me. So I sit there with the document and Google Translate, and I like paragraph by paragraph so that I can unpack what he's talking about. And it's slow, tedious work, but the insight is really amazing. And yeah, there's so much that we discover about ourselves and about how we think because of the languages that we use. And when we can explore that, I think it adds so much value to our thinking. So I'd love to. I would really love to see my books, and I'd have to learn a little bit of language first.
But let's think about it. We have a big market in Brazil, and this is something that we need. We have some futurist colleagues that already endeavor on the issue of the futures, but we need more contributions. We need more people coming and also lecturing. It would be fantastic to have you here in Brazil, Charlotte, and give us some lectures. We can work that out too. Huh? What about?
Yep. My passport is ready. In fact, I've got 2 passports, so I'm ready. That'll be lovely.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
One exercise that I do when we want to make a diagnosis on a team or on a company, I ask people to, in key positions, to make a drawing, even if they are not good on pencil, on making and I tell them, if you don't feel comfortable about your drawing, make some arrows and explain what you wanna express in an art form. And it's fantastic what comes up as in revealing and making us know what is the present mindset in the team and in the culture, and how it is important to really change the culture and to change the way they are thinking. And one of the main things that we can contribute is as what you said, make them thinking in an exponential manner, in a perspective that the future is not linear, and you have to act by this premise.
Yeah, I love what you just said about getting people to draw. And I don't understand. Haven't studied too much about neuroscience and that psychology, but there is something that happens when we're doing something with our hands, because especially people who are too much in their brain, like I am, we think too much, and then we have to move out of our brain and do something with our bodies, even if we draw really badly, like I do. In doing that, we learn something new. And I think a powerful exercise for people who want to think like futurists is to actually spend some time journaling, or if necessary typing, on a computer, or drawing, or finding some way to express what they think. Because I've discovered that for myself a few times where I have had a default belief and I thought, of course I believe this, but I've heard it, or I've been taught it, or I've been indoctrinated it, or there's been propaganda and it's in my brain and I've never examined it. But the minute we go and draw something or write something down, or even type something and see our words, we go, hang on a second, I don't actually believe that. That's limiting, or that's negative, or that's, in some way restricting how I think about things. and you challenge yourself to then really work out, what do you really value, what do you really believe. But that is it takes action. It takes something to actually create that. You can't just sit back and think about it. Something happens when we're doing something with our hands, or drawing or typing. So, and that must be a really powerful exercise for people that you're working with.
Mm-hmm. As you were saying, use your hands. I was thinking, some suggestion as of an exercise would be to take a selfie, but you have to make some kind of gesture or put your hands in some position, that, with an expression, and that would be fantastic. Then to put all the pictures, side by side.
Yeah.
This is how you people are seeing your company, are seeing your challenges today,
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
and I think they would have a good time laughing at themselves, and that's one.
Yeah.
As I imagine, that would be an exercise to really open up, crack the resistance that people have for trying to learn about themselves. They think they are
Yeah.
perfect. No,
Yeah.
let's dive deep and see how you
Mm.
really are. The real
Yeah.
you. And it would be fantastic to have some cracks, because the humor and laughing at yourself, it's really it opens up
It
opportunities.
does. I think what holds us back is this illusion of being perfect, or being good, or being right, or being competent. And the more we can experience the fact that we're not competent in every area, then there's a bit of humility that comes. So even as futurists who have studied or trained or lectured or written books or anything, none of us know what is going to come into the future. There's no guarantee. So there are other sciences where we can look back and we can, with a very high certainty, say that this is the answer, but we can't as futurists, which means that we're not going into a future that we know. We're still going into a future that is unknown. So there has to be this humility of discovering what we don't know, learning about things from other disciplines or other people, so that we're better informed. But we're not going on a journey to the future. We're going on this expedition to an unknown world. And when I wrote my first book, I was playing around with the titles, and I wanted to say something about that talk about terra incognita, which is unknown land. And I subtitled mine as Fortunos Conosquito, or something like that. Futuros Conosquito. It's a unknown future. And we're going on this expedition to discover what it is. And we can go there because we have experience of being on expeditions where we don't know where we're going. We've got skill sets, but there's no actual knowledge on the other end. And once we all realize that humility allows us to work with each other and try things, and not get upset that there aren't guarantees or specific answers, because that would be boring, and it's impossible. So yeah, so there's a lot more of this kind of discovering what is going on.
And as you were saying, to go into the unknown, we have to be humble and open to learn, and to
Yeah.
and to do your own exploration. But
Yeah.
at the same time, you have to have courage. You have to
Mm.
motivate people to have courage to move on into the unknown, because this is what we got. I mean, nobody knows what will happen today
Yeah.
or what will happen tomorrow. Every day you got so many different news that surprises us. So even in our own small world, so
Mm.
it's better to move on to the unknown with courage, of course, a humble attitude, but with
Yeah.
courage, to discover what you haven't known yet.
Hmm. Yeah.
You haven't spoken about it, and maybe we'll need to set up a second conversation just specific on that theme, on science fiction. I know you love science fiction, and Brazilians are also fanatics about Star
Great.
Wars. So,
Oh, very
so you
good.
you can talk a little bit about your own uh,
Yes.
uh, your own character
So
in science fiction. Oh,
Science fiction. For my ally is the Force. You must feel the Force around you.
all right. So yes, science fiction. Um, I became a futurist kind of later in my career. I didn't even know that it was a thing. Um, but I went to a career guidance counselor and she talked, learned more about me and everything. And she said, "You're a futurist." And I didn't know. So I went and learned more about it. But a lot of it comes from science fiction. And uh, so I read science fiction and fantasy. I've just recently been gifted this incredible library of books from African fantasy and science fiction writers. So people who live or were born in Africa and they've written various fantasy and sci-fi stories. And I also like looking at, we get the traditional, like Isaac Asimov, my first crush ever. So there's a traditional science fiction authors, but I'm trying to find out those science fiction stories from other cultures and other languages. But all of that is like in a category called speculative fiction. So we're speculating what the world could look like. And maybe it's different for magic reasons, or maybe it's different for science reasons. But it's really interesting to read a story like Black Mirror, for example, on TV. But to read a story, to watch a story, and say that's what the world could look like, and you can kind of suspend all the rules in your brain to watch something, and then say that was funny, that was amusing, that was an entertaining story, but would we want society to go in this direction or not? And how do we deal with it? So all the stories that talk about robots and androids and cyborgs, it teaches us a lot about how we think about artificial intelligence. And when people make comments about their anxiety about artificial intelligence, it's a similar sort of conversation about robots that look like humans, and they're taking the work and they're making humans irrelevant. And what does that mean for us? Do we still have a purpose? So we got to explore that. So all of that science fiction really kind of unpacks a lot of that for us, and gives us a narrative to discuss it without it just being all the clinical stuff and scary stuff that we're dealing with in real life. So I love science fiction and fantasy. And every year on the 5th of April, it is the pre-anniversary of First Contact Day, which in the Star Trek universe is the day that the Vulcan science vessel lands on Earth because Zephyr Cochrane broke the warp barrier. So I have an annual lecture on that day, and I love looking at that. The first one I looked at was time, how time is different. It's like temporal mechanics, and we talked about ethics, and we talked about money and things like that. So it makes for a really interesting conversation. But yeah, science fiction, fantasy fan. I love seeing how those stories make us think about the world that we're in and the future that we could have. Thank you for asking.
I know I've participated on one of your streaming it, so it was fantastic. I learned
Thank
a
you.
lot. I must confess I wasn't uh, a fan of science fiction. I had some kind of prejudice on reading science fiction, and I wasn't much of a fan of movies. Of course, I went
Mm,
to the movies and watched it because of curiosity. But
yeah,
I know that in Brazil there is the tribe that really loves those movies and really
good.
do a lot with what science fiction
Mm,
provokes and
yeah,
stirs
yeah.
them up in in thinking about the future. So, or having a hope that the future will be, traveling to space and so on, and meeting different creatures, being afraid, having to fight against the forces of evil, and so on. So
Yeah.
it's kind of fun, and at the same time, it really makes your mind more flexible, makes your mind more sensitive to
Yeah.
the reality and to challenges.
Mm.
And traveling to space, it's kind of traveling to the unknown. I mean,
Yeah.
it's something that you need courage.
I have to confess, I have no desire to travel off the planet. So that's not one of my secret ambitions, but I do love the stories.
We have so much to travel around in the world.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I've been to South Africa 3 times already, and I haven't gone farther from the vicinities of Cape Town, at the most 2-3 hours car ride. But
Yeah.
there's so much to see in South Africa. I imagine in the whole Africa continent that I would love to travel to and to visit. And imagine in the world. I mean, I haven't. Of course, we kind of put in priority to go to the U.S. and to go to Europe. But there's so much to see around the world
Yeah.
that it's just fantastic, and to learn every time I go into even if it's a business mission or if it's leisure, you learn a lot with the
Yeah.
other culture, with what you see.
Absolutely.
And you've been traveling a lot in Africa. What's the challenges that you would list as the challenges of the continent, of the African continent?
Uh, there'll be traditional challenges that people talk about, but I'll tell you from my perspective is we've got in the speaking world, we've got some really strong communities that we're trying to develop in terms of professional speakers, trainers, coaches. And the problem that we're actually experiencing is the difficulty of financial transactions across the borders. So there are people who want to do work with each other, but finding a practical way to make payments is a problem. But luckily, because this is not just our priority, there's a lot of different organizations and business chambers and trade unions who are dealing with this. They're looking at different ways. So we're trying to make it easier to do business across the countries, to travel easier across the countries without too many visa requirements and things. So that is, I think, one of the things that is really opening up. But there are people doing incredible artificial intelligence work, digital work, creative skills, just absolutely amazing. So my problem that I see with Africa, that is the problem that's on my heart, is that speakers and futurists and other people in Africa are trying to compare themselves and operate in a world where success is defined according to how the United States or how Europe defines success. Whereas there's real wisdom and insight in Africa. So how do we talk about that on a stage that expects people to speak or present in a different way? So how do we operate in that space without losing what is real to Africa? And that's a difficult thing to get right. And there's also a lot of organizations who are saying, hang on a second, the rules, the laws, the legislation, the values, the education style, how we do things, this is not how we did things in the past. This is how Europe imposed that on us during colonialism. Do we want this or not? So there's a lot of reassessment of so much. So there is this kind of like this disruptive feeling right now. It's like, what will different cultures reject or reframe or adopt or uncover again that is really true to them? What do they want to embrace? And that can be a difficult conversation because a lot of people are sensitive about it. But it's a really interesting one just to hear people say, no, hang on, we've been doing this for the last 2 or 3 decades, but this was never part of our culture. What do we actually want to look like? What are our real values? So I think that's the kind of the tumult that I'm kind of seeing at the moment in Africa. And it's exciting. There's so much good stuff coming out of the continent. I'm very excited about it.
I love how you answer the question and the way you look at the challenges in a very positive way. Because of course, just like Africa and Latin America, we have the corruption problem, we have the poverty, people need to better their income. So progress, development, so many things to work with, and the approach that you stress is more of a using the potential that you already got, and do the best for yourself and do the best for those around you. And so we really and find your own way, because sometimes as you pointed out, we kind of look at the US and we kind of look to Europe and say, oh, to be successful is to go like this. And Brazil has one specific, I mean, it's not as it was in decades past, but Brazil kind of found its own identity with soccer. So as we moved on and showed that we could do so fantastic things with our own potential, not imitating, not going after what others were doing, we were teaching how people should be playing, and this is something that we were very successful in. Of course, today, even in soccer, the rules are almost the same, but even in soccer, things change, and Brazil needs the Brazilian footballers, the soccer leadership, those that can do something for our national team, also need to reinvent themselves and realize that soccer is a new game today. It is,
yeah.
Was,
everything changes.
Everything changes. Everything changes.
Volney, I'd love to carry on talking, but I do have to get to another meeting. But this is I feel so inspired just talking with you. So thank you so much.
We can do it some other times, new conversations. I just want to thank you and say that it's just fantastic to have you in our global network, and at the same time to be linked with you and participate on each other's lives. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Volney. Thank you for what you're doing. It's wonderful work. I appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye now.